All right. You might be wondering why a guy who just critiqued one of my videos is on my live stream today. But you know what? Metatron is a very cordial fellow, and even though he might disagree with me from time to time, and I might disagree with him, and his video was completely wrong. But we're all, you know, we all can speak to one another, and in this particular case, Metatron and I are pretty much in agreement.
Oh yeah,
All right, so we are going to be talking about the pyramid scans, the SARS scans, and Bob Schneiker here, our geologist, is going to tell us about the geology of the situation. Okay. And you can see over on the left, or I don't even know what side it's on. You can see Bob's slideshow. He's going to share some things with us. Okay. So, Bob, do you want to just give us a little bit of introduction to what we're going to be talking about today by using your slides here?
Sure. I actually think Metatron did a great job of describing this on one of his videos. Basically, what they did with the SARS scan project is they basically replaced a geophone, which they call a microphone. Again, some of the translation, I've got some questions for Metatron.
please.
But so they basically replaced the geophone with a microphone, which they derive from their SARS data. So they're claiming to be able to pick up from a radar signal bounced off the Earth, the vibrations within the Earth created by background seismic noise, and from that process it to determine what's underneath, what's down in the ground. Now, that's a very unusual way of doing a geophysical survey. Typically, what you would do is you'd have a source, and you'd measure the time delay that it takes the source signal to get to your particular geophones. But they're doing this really complex thing. They did, again, as Metatron said, they gave a very poor description of what they've done in terms of their SARS data to get the seismic vibration information. And they essentially said nothing about the seismic investigation that they supposedly did, which is the key to this whole process. Because everyone is saying that the SARS data, it can't possibly penetrate the Earth. It can't possibly look down 2 kilometers. And they're not saying it did. In fact, if it did, it wouldn't work because they're saying they need to get the vibrations off the surface of the Earth. And from that, from the seismic information that they're measuring at the surface, determine in sort of a standard geophysical investigation what is down underneath the earth. So that's basically what I'm trying to say. And they
Mhm.
didn't.
We have these three fellows' names on the screen here. Um, Metatron,
Yes,
um, would you consider all three of these fellows to be equal as far as their scientific expertise?
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So who is the real brains behind this?
Okay, so of course we've got these three names: Armando May, Filippo Biondi, Corrado Malanga. The leader is Corrado Malanga. Now, for anyone who has decided to waste 4 hours to watch the conference already knows,
I
Corrado
did.
Malanga is the last speaker. He's the last one. Armando May is the first one, and then Filippo Biondi is the one in the middle. Now, they have been referred to as scientists. However, first of
Well, look,
all,
we got a department of chemistry. This sounds like he's a chemist. Isn't that a scientist?
yeah, that's the thing. So, for instance, if you look at the original conference, which happened, of course, in Italy, 900 people watching, they said that defined him as Professor Corrado Malanga from the University of Pisa, which makes it sound as if he's still teaching there. He's not. And as if he's representing, like, oh, this guy comes from the University of Pisa. Absolutely no affiliation when it comes to this project. It's the first thing I think is important to underline. So he used to
Oh,
teach there,
okay.
but it's not like he's been sent and this has been funded by an actual authoritative body. That's the first thing it's important to say. When it comes to Armando May, no one knows what to call him. Some people call him an alternative Egyptologist, independent researcher. Every time you'll find a different name, a different title. So there is that.
Okay.
Filippo Biondi seems to me the only one that has actual credible understanding of the technology. But as explained correctly, this is their new technique. So there isn't anything that we can compare it to. because I mean they are the only ones that are using these two, by the way, satellites in order to read this data. So, anyways, yeah, whether they are scientists or
Okay.
not, yeah.
Okay. So of the three, Filippo Biondi, you
Hmm.
think is the most respectable
Yes.
as far as science goes.
Sorry,
All right.
the only respectable.
The only. Okay. The only. All right. But there are some experts here on lizard people, as I understand it. But we'll get into that maybe later. All right, Bob, you got to tell me like what slides you want me to go to here. I
Right.
just
I
clicked on it.
wasn't seeing them before, so I pulled up the live stream so I can see it in the background so I can
Oh,
see where
okay,
we're at. I was like, I don't know what everybody's seeing. So now I can. Yeah, so advance it another slide. Let's see where
okay,
we're at. I think I'm going to go another one right away. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying what they did. So they did a very poor job of saying what they did, and they did this passive seismic interferometry. And so passive means, like I was saying, normally when you're doing a geophysical investigation, you would have a source. So it'd be like getting radar information without sending out the radar signal. That's what they did. They're listening to the background information, the background noise that's being generated by cars, earthquakes, trains, wind moving trees and buildings, things like that. And from that, they're saying that they can determine what's underneath. Now, it is possible to do this. It's a very complicated way of doing it with the passive interferometry. And they even took it a step further and said they're doing tomography with it, but they didn't provide any explanation at all in terms of what they're doing and how they were able to do it. They spent all their time talking about the satellite data and how they're able
Hmm.
to convert the satellite data into, glad to see you nodding, into the seismic information, which I don't think is possible. But they certainly didn't provide any information that says that it is possible. So you're seeing on my slide right there, it was a very confusing presentation. Metatron, I think you said basically the same thing, and it was mostly limited to the SARS geophone, and nothing on that. They One of the things that they said, I don't know why that's, I was thinking about moving it, but they're saying there's similar structures all over the planet. And they even mentioned at one point that there might be similar structures on Mars. And I'm like, I don't know, did they say that, Metatron?
Honestly, during the conference proper, because I've also watched a few other interviews, including the one on Project Unity, run by Jay Anderson. So I got a few things to say about that because that's when they go into the deeper discussion. Mars. Currently, I don't remember them mentioning Mars, but I do have my notes from the conference that I used to make my video. So I'll review it as you continue and see if there is any mention of Mars.
All right.
okay.
Thinking about stuff, you were critiqued by Chris Lato, and I liked
Yes.
his analogy of a laser that's being shown onto a window. I mean, this technique has been around for a long time, and it's why you want to be careful if you're talking about anything secret, because you have a stationary laser that's pointed at a window that's picking up the vibrations from the voice inside, and then that is being converted. Well, the signal is bouncing off and picking up those vibrations, and he's saying that that's basically the same thing. It's a good analogy as a starting point, but as he's already pointed out, that if you're inside a brick building, you don't have to worry because the vibrations are not going to shake the wall. But that's in fact what they're doing with the satellite information. They're taking the acoustic information in the same range that we speak in, that we listen in, a little bit lower frequencies, but then they said 0 to 20,000 hertz. So that's basically the audible range. The lower stuff you'd feel. And he's saying that they could determine that. Well, on a brick building, no, you
Mhm.
wouldn't be concerned about that if you're inside a brick building. And yet that's exactly what pyramids are. They are brick buildings. So they're saying that they did this. And another place where this separates from the laser analogy is that the satellite is moving, and it depends upon which satellite in orbit. But if they're in low Earth orbit, it's moving at about 17,500 miles an hour. And so that's going to be taking a snapshot multiple times, thousands of times a second. It's going to measure, it's going to put out a seismic chirp. and it's going to measure that return. But they need to know exactly where that return is coming from. If you're turning this into a geophone and you do not have a precise location on the Earth where that information is coming from, you've got useless information. So it's easy when you
Uh,
got the laser because that's staying at that single point.
just for clarity here, Bob, on the point about the brick wall, are you basically saying that the scans can't penetrate the pyramid?
Well, the question, well, so if you had a seismic source, if you really did a seismic investigation, the low frequency in the seismics would penetrate and would produce a signal that you could pick up. A part of the problem is in what they're doing is and I've got some slides on this where they actually output a seismic chirp. So instead of putting out just a little ping like a sonar ping, like you'd imagine in some old World War II movie, they put out a chirp, and that chirp sweeps up from lower frequencies to higher frequencies in the radar. And then the lower frequencies are actually going to penetrate the Earth, and the higher frequencies won't penetrate as deep. And so on every single one of these pulses that they're going to get a shallowing from maybe 2 meters deep, somewhere in that range, to much shallower as they get to the higher end of that chirp. And so every single one of these measurements is going to be sweeping up from the depth to the surface. And how, if this radar is doing that, how can they possibly get these tiny vibrations that you can't even feel? That you need a geophone to put down there. So if you had a source, getting back to your question, and you were measuring it, yeah, you could do seismics. And in fact, Metatron mentioned correctly the reflection seismics. So that was very insightful that he said that. So
Mhm.
that's the sort of thing that you could do. But I don't see how you can do this from space. How you're going to be able to do this with the SARS data. And more than that, they need to explain, like I've said already, how did they even do the seismic investigation then? That's going to require a huge amount of signal processing because what they do then is you record the information on these geophones and you're picking up noise and you actually turn one of the seismic sources and one of the geophones into a virtual source and by autocorrelating it with all the other geophones. This is a very complicated process that isn't done very often. I don't see how they could possibly do it from space.
Yeah. On your next set of conclusions here, you said claim their method works because it works. So that sounds like you're saying that they're using sort of circular reasoning, or that because it's consistent within itself, that means it's somehow true.
They're saying it works because they look at the Osiris shaft and they're saying, look, we were able to do that. And they point to these other sites around the planet where they've done some research and they're saying, see, we were able to do this. We were able to measure these things, but they haven't actually explained how the method works. They're just saying, see, it works. We've got, yeah, and it sort of is circular reasoning, especially when you're
Because
coming,
they say, well, you're seeing something, so
yeah,
therefore there must be something. Is that kind of how they're?
yeah. So, but
Uh-huh.
they one of the things, and I think it's really important, is they're saying it works because they were able to discern the Osiris shaft and have it extend like twice as deep, maybe 3 times as deep. It's a little confusing to me how deep they say it
Which
extends.
is actually not matching then what we know about it.
Exactly. But they're saying were able to detect it. But one of the things that they claimed, and Metatron, you may have some input on this,
Mhm.
they said that all of the pyramids are built on top of limestone platforms that are
Yeah.
somewhere between 4.5 to 6 meters thick, and below that is sand. And if not for the these platforms, these limestone platforms, the pyramids would collapse into the sand. Well, that's complete bullshit. There is the pyramids are built on solid bedrock, on limestone. This proves that their method doesn't work. And if you
Yeah,
go to one of, go ahead.
if I may, just for a correction, so they didn't say, I think you're referring to the actual shafts, so what you have behind you, and that they say work as pillars to support the pyramids. And by the way, that's one of two explanation as to the function of these pillars. They did not say that the pillars were made of limestone, though. They are saying that the pillars are empty. That's why
Mhm.
sometimes they use the word tube, which I don't know if it works in English and Italian, it kind of does. Anyways, we can say empty pillars. They also say that these pillars, according to the interpretation of these SAR scans, are surrounded by a spiral, and they say that that spiral behaves like glass. So they're saying the spiral is made of glass. The pillars, they don't specify the material, but they are empty. What they did say is that, yes, the one of the reasons why they were there is like 4 and 4, and then they reach at 648 meters under the ground these square cubes. We'll talk about it later if you want. And then this, yeah, one of the reasons is that they work as functional, I guess, support, architectural support. But Armando May, on his interview with Jay Anderson, said it's either for support or it's for the production of electricity. He said that. Okay.
Wow. So, Metatron, did they say how they know what things are made out of?
Yeah, they do
Because,
say that these vibrations, different materials vibrate in different ways. They do say that,
Exactly.
and that's how
So
they
so when they say, "Oh,
claim.
this is glass," it's because
so
of a certain vibration.
Yeah,
yeah, David, if you go to slide 35,
Oh, that's there at the very end.
yeah,
Okay.
because
Okay,
I kind of like I thought
I'll
that's
go
what we're
all
gonna
the
do. We're
way.
gonna jump around like that.
Okay.
So let me see here because I was just calling up. So yeah, not that one. I was gonna go two
Oh,
more.
that's the last slide.
Oh, back up.
Uh,
How's that the last slide? There should be one with
well,
the seismic velocities. There's
well,
a
maybe
little
it's earlier.
let me see here. Oh, yeah, so back up a slide or two. I don't know. I didn't go past the one that I was looking at. Let me go look at my PowerPoint again.
Oh, here's what you're talking about the chirp.
There should be two slides past that slide. That should not be the
Well,
last slide.
that's 35. I don't have any more.
Okay, well,
Sorry to say.
that should be slide 33. What happens? Did you have a maybe you got a slightly different version of this presentation?
It's the most recent one you gave me, so that's all I can say.
That's
But
what
I just
I'm
went through them all. What about this? No? Surface penetration, radar chirp, any of these? Oh, it's a
yeah,
little bit delayed maybe on the live stream. Um,
that's weird. Because
all right. Well, anyway,
so what it is yes. So the seismic velocity, you can that's what they're referring to as a seismic velocity, and as a geophysicist, we use that all the time. And so you can distinguish between a sand and a limestone. And a sand has got a seismic velocity. I don't know why that graph isn't coming up of somewhere about 1,000 meters per second. And the limestone has a seismic velocity in the neighborhood of about 5,000 meters per second. And so if you send a seismic signal and you pick it up, it's like watching a lightning flash. You can count the seconds from the flash, and the same thing is happening in the ground, but it's moving much faster than the sound does through the air. And from that, you can determine what you're looking at. And so
so that part they do have right?
well, no, they're correct in saying you should be able to do that. So go back to that. Go back to the slide that you were on that you say is the last one,
Okay.
because that's from their presentation, and they clearly state that. So what you're seeing there is the pyramid itself, and then the pyramid is on a platform, and that is a limestone platform that the pyramid is built on, and this is true. They're claiming for all three pyramids at Giza,
yep,
and that it wasn't in the press conference. It was in a different YouTube channel, and so each of the pyramids is built on this slab, and that slab itself is resting on sand, a dry sand. Now they're like at opposite ends of the seismic spectrum. If they're saying that they can determine what's beneath the earth and they cannot determine that there is no sand, there is no dry sand underneath the pyramids, that is a given. There is no interpretation. There's no other way of thinking about it. If they're saying it's there, it's proof that their system, their method does not
Doesn't work.
work. They have
I
proven
see.
themselves wrong by saying this is there. And they sort of at times say that these shafts are hollow, but at other times they've said that they actually are structural to part of this platform. It's not very
hmm
clear to me. but they've said something along those lines. So Metatron, I think you're speaking at, Italian. What did you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, what did I get out of it? Of course, the section with Filippo Biondi, which is very technical. I, differently from you, not only I'm not a geologist, but clearly I don't understand SAR technology, so I can't tell you whether what he's saying is correct or not. I can only mediate, so I can only translate. But the first part, which was the presentation run by Armando May, which was supposed to be the justification when it comes to the history, is where it really blew my mind. And that already told me all I needed to know about the methodology and rhetoric that is being used during this entire conference, unfortunately. I'm happy to go into any details. I'll just follow your lead, of course, but anything you want to know about the dating, for instance, of the whole complex of Giza, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, maybe
Well,
we
let's stick
should.
on this for a little bit. I
Okay,
do have
all
some
right,
questions.
Bob.
So one of the
All right,
things
but
that
what you're saying, Bob, is that it should be easy for any scanning system to tell the difference between um, stone and sand, and their system cannot tell the difference.
any seismic measurement, that's going to stand out. And they keep talking about density. Well, the seismic velocity isn't dependent upon density; it's dependent upon the rigidity. So the more rigid the substance, the faster the sound will pass through. So you can see how a limestone would be at a very different velocity than through a sand. Can you go to the slide that has it's pretty much black and white. It just shows a gravitational anomaly of a vertical shaft. I think it's slide 25. At least it is on
Okay.
mine.
Oh, this one here?
Let
Oh,
me
yeah.
see.
Gravitational anomaly of a vertical shaft.
Yeah, perfect. I'm not seeing that right now. I don't know what I got to do. So now this is a textbook example. It is a vertical shaft. If you pull out most geophysical books on gravity surveys, they're going to simulate this because mathematically it's very easy to do. And so what you would do is you go out and you would take gravitational measurements at the surface. And then you will find that over the shaft it's going to be the opposite anomaly of what's shown in that figure. You're going to get a negative gravitational anomaly because there's less material underneath, and so the pull of gravity will be slightly less, and this will stand out. This is the way in which this is the geophysical method by which you would look for a gravitational anomaly. That's how you would find the Hall of Records. You don't do it with seismics. Seismics is an inappropriate tool. So Shock didn't use the right tool. This is the correct tool for looking for voids in the ground, not seismics. You want to use gravity. And so this and you could go, this is totally non-invasive. You just take this device and you put it on the ground and you measure the gravity, pull of gravity, and you go to another spot. And again, you got to know exactly where you're measuring these. And if this is there, it will stand out. Now, they also said that these structures exist all over the planet because they're going to come back and say, well, we wish we could do that, but we don't have access to Giza. Well, they don't need access to Giza because they've already identified that these structures exist at other locations around the planet. And I'm assuming one of those they're going to have access to. And all they got to do is rent this. It's like $150 a day to go out there. They could do this in a day. They could measure that, and they should come back with a gravitational anomaly. That's the way in which they would verify that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the
Mm-hmm.
way that they should have done in the first place because you don't use seismics to identify voids like that in the ground. It's not the best tool. Gravity
Yeah.
is that tool.
It seems to me that whatever claim they make, you would want to use some other corroborating methods to see if it matches, right? So this would be
Exactly.
a good way of doing that. Okay, we're going to test our system, and we'll look at these other systems and see if they match up, if they're corroborating what we say, then what we're saying is true. But they haven't really bothered to do that, right?
No. And it's a no-brainer. This one is so obvious. This is what they should be doing. They should go
Yeah.
someplace and that even using university equipment years ago, we measured the pull of gravity in the basement in the building, and we took this cheap, this is like 40 years ago now, believe it or not, and then we measured the pull of gravity on the top floor, and it was this old elevator, so you could run a tape down and measure the distance, and the difference in gravity gave us that almost exactly the difference that we had for the difference in height that we were above the earth. So this is
Hmm.
you don't need anything really expensive, and something that's going down 2 kilometers is going to stand out so big.
Yeah. We'll give people the science in pieces just to mix things up a little bit. So I'm going to go to Metatron for a second, and I just wanted to get your thoughts, Metatron, on where you think these guys in general are coming from,
Hmm.
the impression you get from them as a group, as a whole,
Yes.
what they're trying to do. Would you say that this is nothing more than them trying to promote a new form of science, or do you think they have other intentions?
Well, I have investigated where Corrado Malanga is coming from, and I've made a couple of videos because on the conference proper, as I say, Filippo Biondi goes into the technical aspects of it. I don't know at that point. When it comes to Corrado Malanga, he goes into the interpretation, which kind of connects to what Bob was explaining now. They do say, when it comes to the interpretation of the data, that they used algorithms, but they don't tell us what algorithms, software, they never tell us what software, and then AI. And I'll be honest with you, with the screenshots that they used, it looked like ChatGPT. I can't put my finger down, but that's something they said that they use in order to interpret. And then Corrado Malanga did say, he stated that AI never gets anything wrong while talking about advanced language models. That's insane as a statement. My main problem was first with the way Corrado Malanga approaches other aspects of ufology and aliens. I see people putting little reptiles. They're absolutely correct in chat. You guys nailed it because he specifically talks. There are lots of interviews with Corrado Malanga, including up to 4 months ago. This is not something I dug from 15 years ago, where he specifically tells us about all the different alien species that have been piloting our history for the last 500,000 years. I'm quoting. And then he said that these aliens look like giant crocodiles, that they walk through your walls to abduct people because they're trying to steal your soul because they have a spirit, but they don't have a soul and they need a soul in order to heal themselves. So, this is what Corrado Malanga has been pushing in Italy for the last maybe 15, 20 years, perhaps even longer. So once you know that, and I can go deeply into what he actually claims, by the way, because I've got it all. After you see that that's where he's coming from, and then you notice that at the very beginning of the conference about this Kefren project, on minute 806, the first thing you see on screen is a reptilian alien. Then you can make the connections. And Armando May does say on his interviews that, and I'm quoting, that the pyramids do not belong to the Egyptian civilization, neither modern nor ancient. Close quote. So the question is normal at this point. Who does it belong to? What civilization? And so the first time I saw this, before I knew about the situation in deeply how deep the rabbit hole goes with Mr. Malanga, I thought, well, it's either they are connecting to Graham Hancock and the idea of an ice age civilization, or it's the aliens, right? Because who else? And this connects to the alternative dating of the Giza complex. And I'm happy to go into it unless you wanted to interject.
Yeah, yeah. How old do they say that it is?
So as you know, obviously, normally we think that it's Fourth Dynasty, Old Kingdom, Ancient Egypt, 2600 BC, roughly speaking, the building of the pyramids. Already, Armando May, at the beginning of the conference, he says that he connects himself to the studies of Robert Bovell. I don't know if you're aware, but he is the one
Yeah,
who already redated them to 10,500 BC. So, because of the whole pyramids are a terrestrial map for Orion, uh, I'm
yeah.
sure people are familiar
The
with that.
Orion correlation. Yeah,
Precisely. So that was the beginning, the starting point of Armando May's work when he says archaeologists got it wrong when it comes to the dating. But then on the conference, he says, but Mr. Robert Bavol also got it wrong. The Giza Plateau complex dates to 36,400 years ago. That's the statement.
why go 10,000 when you can go 36,000, right?
And not to exactly not to mention, he says that a civilization built it, which means we are talking about a civilization that it's either from the upper Paleolithic or the early Mesolithic. So normally we don't consider civilization to exist in the Paleolithic. So there is also that the word usage should be discussed. What civilization are we talking about?
Yeah. So I have to wonder if I mean Filippo Biondi even if he is a scientist, he must have known what he was getting into,
Oh, he
right?
does. He
Because
does.
Malanga would have hired him to basically do this, wouldn't he have?
Not only that,
Or
but
brought him? Yeah,
I
go ahead.
apologize. Didn't mean to be rude. No, I just wanted to say that not only he nods when Armando May, because we need to I sort of discuss the body language too. He nods when Armando May talks about the production of energy through these shafts. And so my question is, if a civilization produces energy but doesn't have anything to harvest that energy with. So we don't have computers from ancient Egypt. We don't have energy weapons. So clearly, the only connection is the one to what Malanga proposes. These pyramids build electricity. The aliens use them to, I don't know, recharge the spaceships. This is me, by the way, not trying to strawman, but I'm just trying to create a correlation here. And then they leave the planet, and therefore we have the electricity production structures, but we don't have tech that uses it. It's either this or why would the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, need electricity? What does a civilization that doesn't have computers need electricity for?
Yeah. Well, there is the Dendera light bulb.
Yeah, that's
I don't
right.
know
Yeah.
if you.
I am aware.
Yeah. So, yeah, so they're on a mission, basically. They're definitely on a mission. And it seems to me like they only need to give enough information to whet everyone's appetite. They don't really need to go all the way and do a peer-reviewed paper. Although they did have one paper, but it
Yes,
was a few years ago,
2022.
is that right?
2022.
Yeah. And it wasn't about the Khafra period, but it was about the Khufu pyramid, yeah.
Yes, with the same
Uh,
technology. I always linked my paper. Sorry, I linked this very paper on every single one of my videos precisely so that people could see it.
yeah. All right, Bob, let's go back to some of the geology
I want to
here.
come
What
back.
else?
I want to come back to something that relates to what
Okay, go ahead.
he was just talking about. So, if you were to construct this, because the water table's there, and a lot of people that have reviewed this are pointing out that the water table is right there, and so it's about 20 meters. Well, so the water table is about 15 meters above sea level, which is the level of the Nile there, and might be a little bit higher as you get towards the pyramids, but it's roughly that. And they show it in a lot of their depictions. So there's no question that the water table's there. So how would you construct this? And I don't know if you want to go to some of the slides that I have there on that.
Yeah, which one would you like me to show?
Um, let me call that up. It would be yeah, starting with slide 28.
28. Okay.
And let me go back to I can see what's going on. Yeah, so slide 28. Here, let me do one more thing. Okay, so slide 28. No, not that one. That
Oh,
I don't know. It's where they're doing a dewatering.
groundwater
Okay, there
freezing?
that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. So so the first thing you want to do, well, I'm just seeing the dewatering. So this actually is happening at the Sphinx because the water table beneath the Sphinx has been rising lately. And nobody's really sure where it came from. I don't know, it just the slides are moving at my end. Yeah,
Oh,
back up. There's a pause here. So
oh.
you're at groundwater. Back
Yeah,
up
there's a
two
delay.
slides.
That's why.
Yeah, so I'm just seeing that. So back up two slides. So
Okay,
at
that's
the
where I
Sphinx,
was,
they
but
put in a.
okay.
Okay, I
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
So
Yeah, there's a delay. There's a delay in the live stream. Yeah.
so beneath
All
the
right.
Sphinx, that's why they were drilling it. If you go online, you'll see where Mark Lehner was. They were drilling it, and he pulls out some cores and he's looking at it, and that's because they put in a dewatering system beneath the Sphinx to draw the water table down. Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
good. You're good.
So yeah, so that's what they're doing at the Sphinx. So that's one of the ways in which you would do this. That would be really difficult to work down to 2 kilometers, basically below sea level, because you're talking about below sea level now. And so go to the next slide, and that's going to be about what you could also do is you could use a chemical grout. So what you would do is you would drill down alongside where you want to construct your shaft, and you pump in a chemical that's going to harden, and that's going to allow you then to come back later and excavate out. So the company I worked for, Lane Northwest, we would do this type of work. So they did this um, in the city of Milwaukee when they were working on the deep tunnel project. They were pumping in grout and then having it harden, and then they would come back later after it hardened and construct the tunnel for the deep tunnel project for the sewer system. And so that's another way of doing it. Go to the next slide. And another way of doing this is to actually freeze the ground. And
Mm.
what you would do is you drill a series of wells around the area that you want to excavate and then freeze the groundwater from top to bottom so that when you're working there, you can actually work and because there's no water coming in because it's all frozen. I once wrote up a proposal to do that on a strip mine in Canada where they wanted to mine gold. My boss told me don't spend a lot of time on it because when they find out what it's going to cost, they're going to say no, that's beyond what we want to do. So it turns
But
out,
you're saying it's possible. Yeah,
well,
you're saying it's possible.
go to the next slide.
Okay.
You don't even have to do that because it turns out that there was a time. If you want to date when they could have actually done this, you could have actually done it between 6 and 5.3 million years ago.
Oh, that's basically the only viable time to
Yeah,
have constructed this.
yeah. because because what happened during that time is the Mediterranean evaporated. It got pinched off by Gibraltar, and the entire Mediterranean Ocean disappeared. And all the
Mm.
rivers that feed the Mediterranean can't keep up with evaporation. So the Nile cut a Grand Canyon, 25% deeper and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. The city of Cairo is sitting on top of a canyon that's filled in with river sediment. So that's when you could have done it. So if you want to, so
What
aliens
about
could have come.
36,000 years ago?
No,
36,000
no,
years ago, could you do it then?
no. This is about the time that that our species separated with a common ancestor from chimpanzees. To put that in perspective, so it
Oh,
had to
this
be
Right.
year, yeah.
aliens.
Yep.
But 36,000 years ago,
No, no.
wasn't the Nile even higher than it is now?
So that would be, I don't know exactly where that falls within the glacial period, but the ocean levels are going to go up and down with that. But
Yeah.
no way would you ever have been able to construct anything that goes 2 meters down. I mean, 2 kilometers down. And here's the other thing: they don't mention this canyon right there. So just east of the pyramids, where they're saying they're seeing down to 2 kilometers, there's a canyon 2.4 kilometers deep right
And
there.
they should have been able to see it,
Well,
huh?
yeah, and I don't, I
With
looked.
their system, yeah.
I don't. They've never extended anything off in that area. But if they're looking for a
I
way
see.
of verifying what they've done, now it's also going to be filled with river sediment. It's not going to be hollow, so it's going to be a different. But you're talking about a solid limestone versus river sediment. Seismically, you should be able to tell that apart very easily.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it is
Yeah.
possible to build it.
Yeah. I've noticed in general lately there have been a lot of interesting claims made based on scans,
Hmm.
right? It seems like scanning is really popular now among the pseudo-archaeology crowd. In other words, well, we took some scans and we found some stuff. So I was just thinking, I don't know, Metatron, if you're aware of this one,
Mm.
the Noah's Ark.
Yep.
They took some scans of Noah's Ark um, in Turkey, I think it is,
Yep.
and we've proven that this was a boat-shaped object. It's a different technology, but it's similar. That people think that using scans can reveal great things like this. I was also thinking about Louis de Cordier saying that he scanned near the Hawara Pyramid and found the lost labyrinth.
Hmm.
That's another one. And basically, they're just looking at like the pictures like you see behind Bob and saying, "See, oh, that kind of looks like whatever to me." Um, do you have any like, general thoughts about this form of science?
Who, me?
You or Bob?
I don't know if Bob wants to speak before. I'll give him
Well,
the chance.
I think they're doing it. If I'm going to speak first, I think they're doing it because you get into this technology which they're presenting and nobody can understand it. In part because they did a terrible job of explaining it, and in part because it doesn't seem to work. But it's magic. And so when they're talking about doing this, they don't expect, I don't think, anybody to be able to come in and say, "Well, that's just woo woo. That's just nonsense." And nobody has enough knowledge. I mean,
Oh, Leon, I got somebody in the chat who's a friend of Louis de Cordier's, and he didn't like. I didn't say the scans weren't legit, Leonardo. I'm just saying the interpretation of the scans is very open to question. Okay, uh,
I would
I didn't
question the
even realize he
scans.
would be here, but yeah, um, yeah. Metatron, did you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually have a video on the Noah's Ark discussion, and because I made a little bit of a I don't know if I can hear you though. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so usually all of these things connected to the CIA and documents. There have been quite a few released recently, whether it be this or the Ark of the Covenant. That's another one. Adam and Eve and Garden of Eden. There have been quite a few. And yeah, I mean, as we were saying, I'm extremely skeptical when it comes to both the motivation, the methodology, the professionalism, in fact, the lack thereof, of the team. And as I say, I cannot refute the scans, but one thing I can do is, all right, but what did they show? And if you remember, during the conference, they showed other locations, other geolocations, where they say they tested and demonstrated, in quotes, that this tech works. And I did say on the original video that my problem is that all of these locations are not beneath the ground zero, right? If you remember, because one was
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
some kind of dam, I think you say, in Turkey, but that's above ground. I even checked the type of dam, and it's one that is constructed on top of like a soil. Um, I don't remember now the exact terminology, but yeah, that one to me doesn't count. And then the only one that we could discuss a little bit is when they showed the scans and the results of the laboratories of the Gran Sasso d'Italia, which is the massif that is in the region of Abruzzo in the center of Italy. And there's this huge mountain called Gran Sasso. And inside it, we built tunnels. This happened I think they started in the 60s, and then they built a laboratory inside there. It's inside the tunnels. It was finished in 85, operative since 87. And so yeah, this is inside rock. I believe is limestone, and another one dolomite, maybe. Perhaps the geologist here can tell us about these.
How deep?
Okay, so the thing is, once again, and that's something that they didn't say in the conference, so I had to look it up. The lab is not below ground zero, is inside the mountain, but it's at the exact same height as the highway A24 that feeds into the tunnel. And this is just to give you an idea. If you imagine Italy is a boot and we are in the very middle, this is a highway that starts in Rome, and then you basically cut horizontally the boot of Italy from Rome to through the city of L'Aquila in Abruzzo, and it ends at the city of Teramo, still in Abruzzo, regional capital. So it's just a straight line, we could say. And the lab is at the same height as the A24 at the highway. Now, how much rock between the lab and the sky, I guess, it depends, because the way they say it's 1,400 meters, but that's from the peak of the mountain, which is called Corno Grande, the Great Corn. But then again, all really they needed to do to bypass that is to sort of use the tech but slanted. So I don't know, and they never explain if these satellites are literally on top of it. In fact, they do say they're slanted, because only if you try and scan it from the very peak would you have to go through 1,400 meters of rock. But already, if you try and go at it from the sides, the depth is different already. But then again, there is no water table. You know, the gentleman Bob was discussing the water table. Of course, there is no water table you have to deal with because it's not below ground zero. So, in my opinion, something that would have been much better would be to try and test this technology on a deep mine. We have mines that go 2,000 meters underground, 4,000 meters underground, if you consider Brazil, I think. Why not? We already have them mapped. So that would be great to check if the technology works. And yeah, so that's my major problem with it.
Do you think it's possible that they did test some other places, but they didn't come out the way they wanted them to, so they just left it out?
Very likely. I mean, I can't prove it,
Uh,
but
yeah, yeah. I wonder how honest this testing is. I mean, it sounds to me like they just want to prove that the system works, and so any data that's going to contradict it, they're just not going to bother sharing that.
I mean,
My
the
take
as I say, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to
Apologies.
say my take on it is I think they actually believe this. I think that they've come up with a way of doing this, and they believe
They just
everything
believe it.
that they're saying. I don't. I That's
So if there is a contradictory piece of data, they might just say, "Oh, that's an anomaly. It's probably not important, or we can't trust it." Or yeah, Dunning Kruger maybe, or not Dunning Kruger. Confirmation bias.
Selective
Yeah,
bias, yeah.
yeah, um,
I was going to
yeah.
say
Interesting.
one thing
Go
along
ahead.
these lines, because they should explain the technology, and and again, Metatron, you probably understood this better than I have, where they're saying they're kind of like being held to a higher standard than the
Mm.
Scans Pyramid project because everyone is, touting all the research that they're doing and how well that's working. And why are they being held to a higher standard? Am I wrong in interpreting it that way, or is that what they're
Can
saying?
you can you clarify to me exactly what you mean? Like higher standard? Like what do you mean? Like that they're not being that they're being attacked? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that they're
Not
being
sure.
Yeah,
attacked for not for
by comparing to
I see.
the other pyramid scan
Yeah.
project.
Well, I do have to because credit where credit is due. Filippo Biondi did say that he's grateful for all sorts of critiques that have been launched against this. So at least when it comes to him, I'll give him the credit that he didn't try to say, "Oh, they are trying to shut us down because big government doesn't want you to know." He did not use that. Um, if anything, I think that's something that would make more sense in connection to the way Armando May discusses these topics. But once again, I don't want to speak for him or put words in his mouth. So I will have to give credit that at least Filippo Biondi is not playing the victim.
Hmm. Hmm.
well,
Well,
the reason I brought
yeah. Go
that
ahead.
up is if you look at slide 22, I mean, it's just relevant. I was just curious if they said that because it wasn't clear to me whether they were saying that or not. But if you've got this new technology like the Scans Pyramid project, on slide 22, if it's the one with the pyramid, you're seeing how it works. They've got four detectors, and so they can tell the muons that came through the particular pyramids, and they're going to see where the voids are because there's going to be more muons hitting the detectors coming from those directions, and you can tell where they came from. This simple slide here demonstrates how that process works. They need to put together a slide where somebody who's not an expert in muons and all this, or radar and satellites and all this, they need to put together a depiction that helps you understand what it is that they've actually done. Because here it is. This is what they've done. It's easy to understand. It's complicated what they did if you get into the details of how it works, but that's it right there. That's how it works.
Hmm.
If I can answer
Ah,
to a person in the
go
chat,
ahead.
because I see
Yeah.
Nano Reaper was asking who is paying for these studies because satellite time is not cheap. They did say that it cost nothing. They said that with this technique, it cost $0. They did say
They were
that on the
using
conference.
they were using public domain data,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
at one point they also mentioned that they were working with the satellite company. And again, that was kind of because not speaking Italian, it was a little confusing. But I got a sense that they might have actually been privy to a little bit. But yeah, they were saying it's public domain data, and that's why
Hmm.
that's why they got upset with people like Hawass because he's saying they never had access, and they're always saying we didn't need access. We don't
Hmm.
Yeah.
need to get
Someone in the
access.
chat,
We can
Bob,
do
is
this all
asking
from
if
space.
there are methods that could be used to cross-reference their findings. You mentioned a couple already, um, but what other methods can be used to double check their work to either corroborate
Well,
it, or to nullify it?
Well, I mean, so yeah, the pyramid. I mean, doing a gravity survey would be number one on my list. I'd want to see that canyon that's just to the east, right there.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think. I think I covered it. I can't think of another way of doing it right now. Not to say that there isn't, but yeah.
Metatron, someone asked if how Italy is receiving this. Are people like, oh, go Italian scientists, all right? Or how popular is it in Italy?
It's only like they do have a following, particularly Malanga. So even when literally just translated what Malanga said in multiple interviews, just to paint a picture on this idea of the aliens abducting people for stealing souls, and quite a few of his fanboys wrote comments in Italian that were extremely rude. Not that it bothers me, doesn't matter, but I want to say yes, they have a following, particularly Malanga, and those people of course, are predisposed to immediately see this as a proof. that look at that, because of Malanga does say, by the way, that the government doesn't want you to know. They know that this is the aliens. They're trying to block it. Malanga absolutely said, he didn't say it during the conference, but he does say it everywhere else. And so, of course, I've been accused of being either paid off by the government or by the reptilians. These have been the accusation I've received. And but apart from them, yeah, the scientific community and in general everyday Italians, it's kind of a case by case, but I would say most people are not particularly supportive of this unless you are into the ufology, which, by the way, it's not like if you want to believe in aliens, I have nothing against it. The only thing is that I think you should disconnect the historical analysis and science with your own personal beliefs. I do that myself because, as you know, I'm a Christian, but I'm not going to tell you the Romans and change the history and tell you the Romans never invaded gold because Jesus told me. Because if I do that, it's not secular anymore. But that's how I see the connection. Once again, particularly in the section that Armando May discussed, where he brought up the idea that these are the holes of Amenti. I don't know if you remember that
Hmm.
part, but that's what he said. And the way he discussed it was through numerology. In fact, if anything, I would call him a numerologist at this point, if we really want to. Yeah.
Yeah. For us in America here, at least for me, these names just came out of nowhere. We never heard of them before. So it seems like, oh, some scientists got together and found something. But from what you're saying, it sounds like they've been around for a
Oh
while, and
yeah.
this is not a surprise.
No, yeah, mostly because, as I say, there is a very strong connection between the work of Malanga and now this finding, which, having been interpreted this way, would, of course, sort of prove the work of Malanga. Do keep in mind, and then again, I'm just saying this for educational purposes only. I'm not accusing anyone. But at the end of the conference, the 900 attendees were instructed to go to the table where they can buy the books that Corrado Malanga sells. So I don't know. There might be a conflict of interest, is all I'm saying.
uh, yeah, yeah. Bob, is there something else from your slides that you wanted to share with everyone?
No, I went through that, but I do have a question
Okay,
for Metatron.
okay,
They
Please.
keep
okay.
talking about granite, and I'm wondering in the English translation, are they, when they're referring to granite, do they actually mean bedrock and they're just using the term granite to describe bedrock? Because there's no granite.
Ooh, yeah. Granite. Well, let me see if in the document I do have that. So I don't have granite here. Of course, once again, how accurate the terminology they use when from a geophysical perspective is, I don't know because I'm no geologist. Granite. Did they say
There's
granite?
granite inside
Maybe the
the
pyramids. Are the
pyramid.
pyramids made
Yeah.
partially of granite?
Part
Maybe.
in the interior of the Great Pyramid, there's some rooms of granite, and
Maybe
there's
that's what
also
it
some
is.
granite on the outside of the Menkaure Pyramid.
Oh yeah.
Um,
They seem to be referring to it as Giza itself.
Mm,
And again, it's a
uh,
little difficult for me to understand what they're getting at.
sure.
I mean, it easily could be a lot of people. The translator might say, "Oh, well, limestone." They hear bedrock and they
Yeah.
just interpret that as granite. I could see how somebody could easily do that.
Mm,
But if they're actually saying granite, well, then I'm going to say that's definitely
okay.
not there.
Well, one thing I can do, sir, is that at any point, even after the live stream, if you can find the section in the conference when they mentioned granite and you want to send it to me, I'll watch it and tell you exactly what they're saying, if anything, if
All
that
right, thank
helps.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
to close this out, I know you have to go to your own live stream,
Oh yeah, but I can
Metatron.
start a little later if needed. It's not a problem.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask, just kind of in general, things like this are going to come up again in the future.
Yeah.
What is for both? This is for both of you to answer. What is your advice as to how not to be fooled in the future by such things? I mean, and how to because there will be real good. There will be like good scans. There'll be legitimate science, and then there's going to be this kind of stuff. How do you spot the difference,
Please.
Bob?
Me? I mean, when I
Well,
first
when you
saw this, when I first heard of it, I was thinking, well, that's cool. That sounds like an interesting technology. I need to learn more about it. Um, I mean, so I don't know if I wouldn't say I was fooled. I would say that I
yeah.
just found it
But it's not
interesting.
something that you're saying that's not something that you can really know right off the bat. You
No,
could you could you might sniff it and say, I'm not sure if it's good, but you're going to fact check it.
Yeah, and I mean, even am I 100% certain that you could not have this method work? No, they could be onto something. There could be a way of doing this. I'm not going to rule it out. And in fact,
Hmm.
as I was thinking about it, as I was preparing this, is like, well, would this work? How would I approach this? And is it a possibility? And I'd have to say, I don't think it's a high probability, but I do think that there's
Hmm.
potentially something there. So I don't know if there's a way of saying there's a litmus test that you can apply to it to say that this is just bullshit. That's
Hmm.
hard to do. I
I
don't
mean,
have
but
that.
the conclusions here were, I mean, I think a lot of people when they just heard what they were saying, it just seemed, oh, that seems far fetched to me. Like, they seemed like very, like if they had said that we had found a chamber or something like that, people would have been like, oh, I think they would have been more likely to believe it. But when you go really far, and saying like, oh, well, this is this is, and describing this vast city below the pyramids, it seems a little bit suspect, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's exactly it.
Absolutely.
So as I started learning more about it, I was realizing, oh, this is just nonsense in terms of the story that they're telling. But I totally cannot totally dismiss the
Yeah.
possibility that there is a way of making this work or something like it at some point in the future or even now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes,
Metatron?
to add to that, I think for me is I appreciate actually. I do think that we need to always leave a little window of skepticism towards anything, but the size of that window should be proportional to the evidence that has been presented. So yeah, I don't know if aliens have ever reached this planet. I can't prove it one way or the other. But right now my window is kind of small. But if you present some good evidence, I love it. I love the idea. I really do. What I would do to answer the question from Dr. Miano is, of course, use critical thinking and reason and logic. And then in this specific case, what really helped me was the horrible presentation given by Armando May, because he botched the job completely, which is why after that, the following two speakers, I kind of knew, oh, okay. And that's why my level of skepticism when it comes to this is very high right now. Because as Dr. Miano can teach me, every thesis and any hypothesis, in fact, this is even lower than a thesis, has to have a foundational justification. And the foundational justification, which in theory should have given us a position of, oh, this could actually be right, is completely utter nonsense. And it's what Armando May presented. Just to give you one, but I mean, again, I could talk about this for an hour, but just to give you one thing, when he was talking about the dating we already discussed, at one point he spoke specifically about the Valley Temple, the Temple of the Valley that is in the complex.
Hmm.
And he said that the Temple of the Valley is how he knew that under there was something which then ignited the whole SAR technology and, whatever it's called. And so, why does that temple give him this connection? Because he said he looked at a map, a sort of 2D projection of the temple, and already he said, to me that looks like a microchip. So that it's like a message. They build a
Okay.
temple in a certain way, placing the columns and everything, so it looks like a microchip. That's the first thing that he says. Then he said the exact number of columns and number of tunnels and number of corridors. He counted them and he came up with numbers because of it. So there are 16 columns, which means number seven. That is because in numerology, if you're not aware, when you have two-digit numbers, you need to make the sum of it. So if you have 16 columns, then the message is 6 plus 1 equals 7. So that's one of the, I guess, whatever you want to call it, one of the things that we're discussing. Then he said there is one niche. So one, and then he said this looks like a three, the way the corridors are put together. So he came up with the number 371. He ignored everything else on that map. There are other corridors. He doesn't care for whatever reason. He then flipped the number, okay, and said that the number now is 173 or 137, whatever the heck. And he says that that number means the sort of, oh gosh, resurrection and reincarnation of the soul of man, hence amenti, because it's the whole of the dead. And that's how they justify, oh, that's why we looked at it, because this is the message from who? From some architects, alien or not, whom 36,400 years ago, specifically chose the exact number of columns, not for structural integrity of the tons of slabs of stone that they had to put on it. No, sir. It was so that someone, Armando May, 30,000 years in the future, would look at it and say, 616 could be 7. So they want us to look down there. Why didn't they write it? Why didn't they just write it? Also, why did they use
Yeah,
stone? If these people, if these aliens can traverse the galaxy, why are they using stone? Beyond me. When I see
yeah,
that, then I'm like, okay, the justification failed at an intellectual level.
yeah.
And so
Well,
that's
the
why it's like,
mentality is nothing is a coincidence, right?
he said
It's
that in the conference.
all Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
said it.
It's all means something. I did a video last year about Randall Carlson, how he took measurements from the Great Pyramid, and it correlated with the circumference of the Earth and all of this kind of stuff. And it's got to be connected. And there's a lot of people who think like that, Um, and but the fact is, there is coincidence. You know what I mean? And also, when you have to doctor the numbers, like, oh, we're gonna switch them around, we're gonna reverse them, we're gonna do multiply them by this or that, and then you
Yeah,
get this. You can make anything work.
that's exactly
Yeah.
what he did with the numbers. He even changed his mind on the other conference, changed the number again.
Oh, did he? Oh,
Oh yeah,
well, there you go. All right. Well, um, I think uh, I think we're going to let it. We're gonna say goodbye.
absolutely.
I'm sure there will be more things that will be said. There'll probably be some more defenses made by the three men, and maybe we'll have more to say about it. But anyway, everybody, I thought you would enjoy hearing from Metatron and Bob Schneiker about this. Hope you enjoyed the live stream. Kind of did it, quickly. It was kind of last minute, but hope you enjoyed it. And keep watching the channel. Um, Look out for Bob. He comes up every now and then. We'll have him on again in the future. And Metatron, of course, from his own channel.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you both for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having
Absolutely, it
me.
was a pleasure.
Okay, we'll see you later, everybody.
See you.